Welcome, high-value men. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I found myself in a relationship that, at first glance, seemed perfect. She was everything I thought I wanted: smart, beautiful, and charming. I was determined to make it work, so I gave her all my attention. I canceled plans with friends, ignored my hobbies, and poured every ounce of energy into making her happy. I thought that's what love looked like: constant effort, no matter the cost. But here's what happened. The more I gave, the less she seemed to value it. She started pulling away, becoming distant. I became obsessed with trying to fix it, texting more often, planning more elaborate dates, and bending over backward to please her. But nothing worked. Instead of bringing us closer, my efforts drove her further away. It wasn't until much later that I realized the truth. I had lost myself in that relationship. By overgiving and overcompensating, I had unknowingly sent a message that I didn't value my own time, energy, or worth. And when you don't value yourself, no one else will either. That experience was a wake-up call. It forced me to look at myself and ask some hard questions. Why was I so desperate to keep her? Why did I ignore the signs that the relationship wasn't healthy? And most importantly, why was I so afraid to walk away? The answers were uncomfortable but necessary. I realized that I had been operating from a place of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of rejection, and fear of not being enough. And those fears had led me to behave in ways that not only hurt me, but also pushed her away. It was a tough pill to swallow, but that moment became the foundation of a transformation. I started learning about Stoicism and the principles of high-value men. I began to understand that true strength doesn't come from chasing or convincing. It comes from self-respect, self-control, and self-worth. Now, let's be honest. If you're here watching this video, chances are you've been in a similar situation. Maybe you felt overlooked, undervalued, or stuck in a relationship where you gave more than you got. Maybe you found yourself questioning your own worth, wondering why she's pulling away or why things don't feel balanced. Here's the good news. It doesn't have to be that way. You can turn it around, but it starts with you. In this video, we're diving into 7 transformative acts that will not only change how women see you, but also transform how you see yourself. These aren't tricks or games. They're timeless principles rooted in Stoicism and the psychology of high-value men. Here's what you'll gain. The confidence to walk away when a relationship isn't serving you. The ability to create balance and mutual respect in your relationships. A magnetic presence that draws women to you. Not because you're chasing them, but because of the man you've become. But here's the most important part. These acts aren't just about attracting women. They're about creating a life that you're proud of, a life filled with purpose, passion, and self-respect. Number 1, be comfortable walking away. Let me start with a question. How many times have you stayed in a relationship longer than you should have because you were afraid to be alone? Maybe you put up with behavior that made you feel unappreciated or even disrespected because the thought of losing her seemed unbearable. Here's the harsh reality. The moment you start fearing the end of a relationship, you lose your power. That fear creeps into your actions, your words, and even your energy. You start bending over backward to please her, tolerating things you shouldn't, and compromising your self-respect. But here's the kicker. When you behave this way, she senses it, and instead of drawing her closer, it pushes her away. Women are naturally drawn to strength and independence. It's not about being cold or detached. It's about knowing your worth so deeply that you're not afraid to walk away when a relationship isn't meeting your standards. Take a moment to imagine this. You're dating someone who's been distant and inconsistent. Maybe she doesn't text back as quickly as she used to, cancels plans last minute, or doesn't make an effort to show she values you. The typical reaction? Many men cling harder, trying to fix the situation, convincing her to stay or making excuses for her behavior. But here's what a high-value man does instead. He confidently sets expectations and lets her know that he values honesty and effort. For example, you might say, "I value honesty and effort in a relationship, and it feels like we're not on the same page. If this isn't working for you, I'm okay with walking away if that's what's best for both of us." Do you feel the power in those words? You're not begging her to stay. You're calmly and confidently showing that your happiness doesn't depend on her validation. This isn't about manipulation, it's about self-respect. Now, let's dive deeper into why this works. One of the core principles of psychology and Stoicism is that people value what feels scarce. When you're willing to walk away, you signal that your time, energy, and presence are privileges, not guarantees. You become the man who knows his worth and won't settle for less than he deserves. But let's address the fear that often holds men back. What if she doesn't come back? It's a valid concern. Walking away requires courage because there's always a chance she might not step up. But here's the thing. If she doesn't come back, she wasn't the right person for you in the first place. By walking away, you're creating space for someone who will value you and meet your standards. Let me share a story about a friend of mine, James. He was in a long-term relationship where his girlfriend constantly disrespected his time and energy. She would cancel plans, ignore his texts for days, and dismiss his feelings when he tried to communicate. James was afraid to confront her because he didn't want to lose her. But deep down, he felt miserable. One day, he decided enough was enough. He calmly told her, "I care about you, but I need to feel valued in this relationship. If you can't meet me halfway, I think it's better for both of us to move on." At first, she was taken aback. She didn't expect him to stand up for himself. But something incredible happened. She started putting in more effort, respecting his time, and valuing him in ways she hadn't before. Why? Because James showed her that he wasn't afraid to walk away, and that made her see his worth in a new light. Now, this doesn't mean walking away is always about winning her back. Sometimes it's about freeing yourself from a relationship that no longer serves you, and that in itself is a victory. Here's how you can practice this. 1. Identify your deal breakers. What behaviors or patterns are unacceptable to you? Is it dishonesty, lack of effort, or emotional unavailability? Get clear on your boundaries. 2. Communicate your expectations calmly. Use statements like "I feel" or "this is what I need" in a relationship instead of blaming or accusing. 3. Be prepared to follow through. If your boundaries are crossed and nothing changes, be willing to walk away. Remember, this isn't about punishing her, it's about honoring yourself. Now, let's reflect for a moment. Think back to a time when you stayed in a relationship that didn't serve you. How did it make you feel? Did you lose confidence in yourself? Did you feel drained or unfulfilled? Now imagine the opposite. Imagine being so grounded in your self-worth that you can calmly walk away from anything or anyone that doesn't align with your values. Imagine how empowering it would feel to say, "I deserve more than this," and act accordingly. Walking away isn't an act of giving up, it's an act of self-love. It's a declaration that you trust yourself to make decisions that honor your worth. And guess what? Women respect men who respect themselves. They're drawn to the quiet confidence of a man who doesn't need them but chooses to be with them. When you master this act, something incredible happens. You stop chasing, you stop clinging, and you start attracting. Not just women, but opportunities, respect, and a sense of peace that comes from living in alignment with your values. So let me ask you this. Are you ready to reclaim your power? To stop tolerating less than you deserve and step into the role of a high-value man? The next time you find yourself in a situation where you're undervalued or disrespected, remember this. Walking away isn't a loss. It's the ultimate expression of strength. And when you embody that strength, you'll not only command respect, but you'll also attract the kind of woman who truly values you for who you are. Number 2, value your attention. Let's talk about attention, yours to be exact. Have you ever felt drained, like you were giving so much to someone but barely receiving anything in return? It's exhausting, isn't it? Maybe you were the one always texting first, planning dates, or checking in to make sure everything was okay. And yet, no matter how much you gave, it felt like your efforts were being overlooked. The truth is, attention is one of the most valuable currencies in any relationship, and how you use it says a lot about how you value yourself. Imagine this. You're constantly available, always ready to reply the second she texts, rearranging your schedule to accommodate her every whim. At first, she might seem flattered by your efforts, but over time, she starts pulling away. Why? Because what's freely given is rarely appreciated. Think about it. When was the last time you truly valued something you had unlimited access to? That's the harsh reality of human nature. We cherish what feels rare and special. And if you're giving your attention away without boundaries, it loses its value, not just in her eyes, but in your own as well. Let me share a story. A friend of mine, Alex, used to struggle with this. He'd meet someone he liked and immediately go all in. He'd text her every morning, call her every evening, and make himself available 24/7. At first, things would go well. She'd respond enthusiastically, enjoy the attention. But inevitably, her interest would wane. She'd take longer to reply, cancel plans last minute, or seem distant during conversations. Alex couldn't understand it. He thought he was doing everything right, showing her he cared, being attentive and supportive. But what he didn't realize was that his constant availability made him seem, well, too easy to take for granted. It wasn't until Alex started valuing his own time and energy that things began to shift. He stopped being overly available and started focusing on himself, his career, his fitness, his hobbies. Instead of texting her the moment she came to mind, he waited until he had the time and space to genuinely connect. When she asked to meet up, he didn't drop everything. He prioritized his own schedule first. And you know what happened? She started texting him more, making plans to see him, and even complimenting his confidence. The dynamic had completely shifted, and it all started with Alex learning to value his attention. The lesson here is simple but powerful. Your attention is a privilege, not a guarantee. It's something that should be earned, not given freely. When you treat it as such, you send a message, not just to her, but to yourself, that your time and energy are valuable. And that kind of self-respect is magnetic. Valuing your attention doesn't mean ignoring her or playing games. It means creating balance. For example, if she texts you, you don't need to respond immediately. Take your time. Maybe you're at the gym, working on a project, or simply enjoying some downtime. When you do reply, be warm and engaging, but don't overcompensate. By doing this, you're subtly showing her and yourself that you have a full, fulfilling life outside of her. When you start valuing your attention, something remarkable happens. Women begin to see your time as something worth earning. They respect you more because they see that you respect yourself. And here's the beauty of it. This isn't about manipulation or playing hard to get. It's about living a life so rich and fulfilling that your attention naturally becomes a rare and precious gift. But let's not sugarcoat it. This shift requires effort. It means breaking old habits of overgiving and learning to pause before you act. The next time you feel tempted to overextend yourself, to send that extra text, plan that extra date, or keep the conversation alive, stop and ask yourself, is this person earning my attention? If the answer is no, redirect that energy towards something that truly matters: your goals, your passions, your own growth. When you value your attention, you stop chasing approval. Instead, you start attracting respect, admiration, and a sense of fulfillment that no one can take away. And here's the best part. When you start treating your attention as the valuable resource it is, you'll notice a shift, not just in how women respond to you, but in how you see yourself. You'll carry yourself with more confidence, more purpose, and more clarity. And that, high-value men, is a game changer. So, let me leave you with this. How will you start valuing your attention today? Are you ready to make the shift and reclaim your power? If you are, stay with me, because the next act we're diving into is one of the most powerful principles of all: emotional independence. Number 3, emotional independence. Emotional independence is one of the most powerful traits a man can cultivate, yet it's something many men unknowingly struggle with. Let's be honest. How often have you found yourself waiting by your phone, hoping for a text or call? How often has your mood depended on whether or not she showed you attention? It's easy to fall into this trap, especially when you're invested in someone. But here's the harsh truth. Nothing pushes a woman away faster than feeling like she's responsible for your happiness. Women are naturally drawn to men who are their own source of joy. Men who radiate calm, confidence, and fulfillment, regardless of external circumstances. Emotional independence isn't about shutting down your feelings or pretending you don't care. It's about mastering your emotions so that your peace and happiness aren't tied to anyone else's actions. Let me tell you about a man I once worked with. Let's call him David. David was in a relationship with a woman he adored, but he noticed a pattern. If she didn't text him back immediately, he'd feel anxious. If she seemed distant, he'd start overthinking everything he might have done wrong. His entire emotional state revolved around her responses or lack thereof. Over time, this behavior took its toll. She began to feel smothered, and David's constant need for reassurance became exhausting for both of them. Eventually, the relationship ended, leaving David feeling even more dependent and lost. What David didn't realize at the time was that his emotional dependence was rooted in insecurity. He was seeking validation from her because he hadn't learned how to validate himself. And this is where the concept of emotional independence becomes transformative. Imagine for a moment that you're dating someone and things are going well. Then suddenly, she starts pulling back. Maybe she's not texting as much, or she's canceling plans more frequently. An emotionally dependent man might panic. He might start texting her more, seeking answers, or trying to fix the situation. But a man who's emotionally independent handles it differently. Instead of chasing or overreacting, he mirrors her energy. He continues living his life, focusing on his goals, passions, and friendships. He doesn't let her actions dictate his worth or happiness because he knows that his value isn't tied to her attention. This approach not only protects his peace but also shifts the dynamic in his favor. Here's why. Emotional independence is magnetic. When a woman sees that you're calm, grounded, and unshaken, it signals that you're a man who knows his worth. You're not leaning on her to fill your emotional gaps. You're inviting her to share in your already fulfilling life. To cultivate emotional independence, the first step is awareness. Pay attention to your emotional triggers. Do you feel a wave of anxiety when she doesn't respond right away? Do you find yourself doubting your worth if she seems distant? Instead of spiraling into self-doubt, pause and remind yourself, her actions don't define my value. I am enough no matter what. This is where Stoicism comes into play. One of the key teachings of Stoicism is to focus on what you can control and let go of what you can't. You can't control how someone else behaves, but you can control how you respond. By mastering your emotional reactions, you take back the power you may have unknowingly given away. Let's take a practical example. Imagine you've been seeing someone for a few months, and suddenly she starts pulling back. Instead of panicking or chasing her, you stay calm. You continue prioritizing your goals, hobbies, and friendships. You don't ignore her, but you don't overextend yourself either. By maintaining your composure, you show her that your world doesn't revolve around her, and that's incredibly attractive. Here's the beauty of emotional independence. Even if she doesn't come back, you're still winning. Why? Because your happiness doesn't depend on her presence. You've built a life that fulfills you, with or without her. Let me share another story. This one about a man named Michael. Michael was in a relationship where his girlfriend often pulled away emotionally. Instead of reacting with anxiety or desperation, Michael decided to focus on his passions. He picked up cycling, reconnected with old friends, and even started a side business. By the time his girlfriend realized what she was missing, Michael had already built a life so fulfilling that he no longer needed her validation. In fact, their dynamic changed completely. She began chasing him, and he had the confidence to decide whether or not that relationship still served him. This is what emotional independence does. It shifts the power back to you. It allows you to approach relationships from a place of abundance, not neediness. And when you operate from abundance, you naturally attract respect, admiration, and deeper connections. But let's be real, cultivating emotional independence isn't easy. It requires self-awareness, discipline, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about yourself. It might mean letting go of old habits like constantly seeking reassurance or breaking free from toxic patterns. But the payoff is worth it. Ask yourself, what brings you joy outside of your relationships? Maybe it's a hobby you've neglected, friendships you've let drift, or a self-care routine you've abandoned. Reclaim those parts of your life. When you're fulfilled on your own, you don't need to cling to anyone else for happiness. Emotional independence also means embracing resilience. Life is unpredictable, and relationships will have their ups and downs. But when you're emotionally independent, you can navigate those challenges with grace. You trust yourself to handle whatever comes your way because your happiness isn't tied to external circumstances. It comes from within. So let me leave you with this thought. Emotional independence isn't about being distant or detached. It's about showing up as your whole, authentic self without placing the burden of your happiness on anyone else. When you embrace this mindset, you don't just attract healthier relationships, you discover a deeper sense of peace and confidence within yourself. And that, high-value men, is a power no one can take away from you. Number 4, give her space to chase you. Let's get something straight. Chasing her isn't your job. As a high-value man, your role is not to be the one constantly initiating, planning, or keeping the connection alive. The truth is, relationships thrive on balance. And when you're doing all the heavy lifting, you rob her of the opportunity to invest in you. Think about it. How satisfying is it to earn something you've worked hard for? Whether it's a promotion at work, a fitness goal, or even a new skill, the sense of accomplishment comes from the effort you put in. The same principle applies to relationships. When you're always the one chasing, texting first, or planning every interaction, you make it too easy. There's no sense of challenge, no opportunity for her to put in effort, and no room for desire to grow. Here's the reality. Women need space to chase. It's not because they're lazy or disinterested. It's because desire is fueled by effort. When she feels like she's earning your attention, it becomes more meaningful. But when you're constantly available, over-investing, or pushing for connection, it can feel overwhelming or even suffocating. Let me share a story to illustrate this. A friend of mine, Paul, was dating a woman he was really into. In the beginning, everything seemed perfect. They texted constantly, went on dates, and spent a lot of time together. But as the weeks went by, Paul noticed a shift. She started replying less often, canceled plans more frequently, and seemed less enthusiastic overall. Paul's first instinct was to try harder. He texted her even more, planned elaborate dates, and went out of his way to make her happy. But the harder he tried, the more distant she became. It wasn't until he finally backed off, stopped texting so much, focused on his own life, and gave her the space to reach out, that things started to change. Suddenly, she was the one texting first, asking to see him, and putting in the effort to reconnect. So why did this work? It's simple. Scarcity creates value. When Paul was always available, his attention became something she took for granted. But when he pulled back and gave her space, she began to miss him. That sense of absence created a desire to reconnect, and it reignited her interest. Now let's be clear. Giving her space doesn't mean ignoring her or playing hard to get. It's about creating balance. It's about allowing her the opportunity to invest in the relationship, to take initiative, and to show that she values your time and presence. Here's how you can apply this principle in your own life. First, start by becoming aware of how often you're initiating contact. If you're always the one texting first, challenge yourself to wait and see if she reaches out. If you're constantly the one planning dates, take a step back and give her the chance to suggest something. This isn't about testing her or keeping score. It's about creating a dynamic where both of you are equally invested. When she puts in effort, it's not just about showing that she cares. It's also about deepening the connection. Relationships that are built on mutual effort are stronger, more balanced, and more fulfilling. Let's look at another example. Imagine you've just started dating someone new, and the chemistry is great, but you notice that you're always the one texting first or suggesting plans. Instead of continuing this pattern, take a step back. Focus on your own life, your work, your hobbies, your friendships. Give her the chance to notice your absence and reach out. When she does text or call, respond warmly, but don't overcompensate. Keep the conversation natural and engaging, but resist the urge to flood her with enthusiasm or immediately suggest meeting up. Let things unfold naturally, and allow her to take the lead when she feels ready. Here's why this approach works. Women are naturally drawn to men who have a full, fulfilling life outside of the relationship. When you're not always available, it sends a powerful message. I value my time and energy, and I'm not afraid to let the relationship breathe. This principle is deeply rooted in Stoic philosophy. By focusing on what you can control, your actions, your mindset, your priorities, you create a sense of calm and balance in the relationship. You're not chasing her to fill a void in your life. You're inviting her to share in the richness of the life you've built for yourself. But let's address a common fear. What if I give her space and she doesn't come back? It's a valid concern. But here's the truth. If she fades away, it's a sign that her interest wasn't as strong as you deserve. And while that might sting in the moment, it's a blessing in disguise. It frees you to attract someone who will value and invest in you wholeheartedly. One of my clients, Michael, learned this the hard way. He was in a relationship where he felt like he was doing all the work. Every time he tried to pull back, he feared losing her, so he'd overcompensate by trying even harder. It wasn't until he finally trusted himself to let go and give her space that the dynamic changed. Not only did she come back stronger, but Michael also gained the confidence to set boundaries and prioritize his own happiness. Here's the takeaway. Giving her space isn't about manipulation. It's about respecting yourself and the relationship enough to create balance. When you trust her to take initiative, you give her the opportunity to show how much she values you. And when she does step up, it's not just because she feels obligated. It's because she genuinely wants to. So let me leave you with this thought. Are you willing to give her the space to chase you? Are you confident enough in your worth to let the relationship breathe, even if it feels uncomfortable at first? If you're ready to embrace this principle, stay with me. The next act we're diving into is one of the most transformative yet, celebrating your own life and becoming the man every woman admires. Number 5, celebrate your own life. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you truly felt alive, completely immersed in something that brought you joy? Think about those moments when you were so focused on a passion, a project, or even a quiet walk in nature that you forgot to check your phone. You weren't worried about who was texting you or whether someone was thinking about you. Those moments, rare as they may seem, hold the key to something truly powerful. The ability to celebrate your own life. One of the most magnetic traits of a high-value man is his sense of purpose and fulfillment. Women are naturally drawn to men who exude confidence, passion, and independence. Why? Because a man who celebrates his own life doesn't just attract attention, he commands admiration. He becomes someone she respects, admires, and ultimately can't resist. Now, let me share a story about a friend of mine, Richard. Richard was in a long-term relationship that, like many, started off great. But as time went on, he noticed something troubling. He had gradually shifted his priorities to revolve entirely around his girlfriend. He stopped hanging out with his friends, neglected his hobbies, and even passed up career opportunities to spend more time with her. At first, she seemed to appreciate his devotion, but eventually, she began to pull away. Richard couldn't understand it. He was giving her everything, his time, his energy, his attention. But instead of drawing her closer, his actions seemed to push her further away. What Richard didn't realize was that by abandoning his own life, he had unknowingly sent a message. My happiness depends on you. And that kind of dependence, while well-intentioned, can feel suffocating. When Richard finally decided to make a change, everything shifted. He started prioritizing his own goals, reconnecting with his friends, and reigniting his passion for music, a hobby he'd put on hold for years. He didn't do it to win her back. He did it because he realized he'd lost himself along the way. But here's what happened. The more Richard focused on his own life, the more his girlfriend started to re-engage. She saw a version of him that was confident, driven, and fulfilled. This story highlights a fundamental truth. A man who celebrates his own life is irresistible. When you're living with purpose and passion, you radiate an energy that's impossible to ignore. And it's not just about attracting women. It's about becoming the best version of yourself. So, how can you start celebrating your life? The first step is to reconnect with what makes you happy. Think about the hobbies, passions, and goals you've put on hold. Maybe it's a fitness journey you've been neglecting, a creative project you've always wanted to start, or simply spending more time with the people who uplift you. When you fill your life with things that bring you joy, you stop seeking validation from others. You're no longer waiting for her to text back or wondering if she's thinking about you. Instead, you're too busy building a life that excites you. And that kind of independence is incredibly attractive. But celebrating your own life isn't just about being busy. It's about being intentional with your time and energy. It's about setting boundaries and saying no to things that don't align with your values. It's about creating a life that feels authentic to you, not one that revolves around someone else's expectations. Let's imagine this scenario. You've been dating someone for a few months and things are going well. But instead of rearranging your schedule to accommodate her every request, you stick to your own priorities. If she asks to meet on a night when you've already made plans, you say, "I'd love to see you, but I have plans tonight. How about tomorrow instead?" That simple act of prioritizing your life sends a powerful message. I value you, but I also value myself. Women respect men who respect themselves. When she sees that you're living a life filled with purpose, she'll want to be part of it, not because she feels obligated, but because she's inspired by your energy. But let's not ignore the elephant in the room. What if you're afraid to celebrate your own life because it means spending more time alone? It's a valid fear, but here's the truth. Solitude isn't something to avoid, it's something to embrace. When you spend time alone, you get to know yourself on a deeper level. You learn what truly makes you happy, what drives you, and what fulfills you. And that kind of self-awareness is the foundation of confidence. A man who celebrates his own life doesn't need a relationship to feel complete. He's already whole. And that wholeness is what makes him so magnetic. It's what sets him apart from the men who chase, cling, and overextend themselves in the hope of earning someone else's approval. Let me leave you with a challenge. Take a moment to reflect on your life as it is right now. If you removed all your romantic relationships from the equation, what would bring you joy? What would give your life meaning? Write those things down. Maybe it's traveling to a new place, starting a passion project, or simply spending more time with the people who matter most to you. Whatever it is, commit to it. Not for her, not for anyone else, but for yourself. When you celebrate your own life, you send a powerful message. I am enough. I am worthy of love and respect, not because of what I do for others, but because of who I am. And that kind of confidence doesn't just attract women, it transforms how you see yourself. So let me ask you this. What's one thing you can do today to start celebrating your life? Take that first step and watch how everything begins to shift. Number 6, set boundaries and keep them. Let's talk about something that often gets overlooked but is one of the most powerful ways to command respect: setting boundaries. When was the last time you clearly stated your limits in a relationship and actually followed through? Be honest. Have you ever let something slide just to keep the peace? Or worse, because you were afraid of losing her? If you have, you're not alone. Many men hesitate to set boundaries because they fear being seen as difficult, controlling, or even high maintenance. But here's the truth. Boundaries don't push the right people away. They pull them closer. Think about it this way. Boundaries are not walls meant to keep others out. They're guideposts that communicate what you value and how you expect to be treated. When you enforce them, you're not just protecting yourself, you're sending a clear message about your self-worth. And nothing is more attractive than a man who respects himself enough to set and uphold his boundaries. Let me share a story about a man named James. James was in a relationship where his girlfriend often canceled plans at the last minute. At first, he brushed it off, thinking, she's just busy. It's not a big deal. But over time, the pattern continued, and it started to bother him. He felt unimportant, like her time was more valuable than his. The old James would have kept quiet, hoping she'd change on her own. But this time, he decided to do something different. He calmly told her, I understand that things come up, but I need reliability in a relationship. If you can't commit to plans, it's better to let me know up front so we can avoid misunderstandings. At first, she was surprised. She didn't expect James to speak up, let alone hold her accountable. But instead of getting defensive, she apologized and started making a genuine effort to be more considerate. Why? Because James's boundary wasn't about controlling her. It was about honoring himself. This story highlights an important principle. When you enforce your boundaries, you inspire others to treat you with more respect. And if they don't, that's your signal to walk away, because a relationship without mutual respect isn't worth your time. Setting boundaries isn't about being rigid or inflexible. It's about knowing your non-negotiables and being clear about what you will and won't tolerate. For example, if dishonesty, lack of effort, or emotional unavailability are deal breakers for you, make that known. And when those boundaries are crossed, don't just talk about leaving. Be prepared to follow through. Here's the catch. Boundaries only work if you're consistent. If you set a limit and then let it slide without consequences, you're sending the message that your words don't carry weight. Consistency is everything. It shows that you mean what you say, and it reinforces your self-respect. But let's be real. Setting boundaries isn't always easy. It takes courage to speak up, especially if you're used to avoiding conflict or putting others' feelings above your own. It can feel uncomfortable, even scary, to risk rejection or pushback. But let me ask you this, what's scarier? Momentary discomfort or spending your life in a relationship where you feel unseen, unappreciated, and undervalued? Let's dig a little deeper into why boundaries are so essential. At their core, boundaries are about protecting your emotional well-being. They prevent you from overextending yourself and ensure that you're giving and receiving in equal measure. When you set a boundary, you're saying, I value myself, and I expect you to value me too. That's not selfish, that's healthy. Now imagine this scenario. You're dating someone who has a habit of making hurtful jokes at your expense. At first, you laugh it off, telling yourself, it's just her sense of humor. But over time, those jokes start to chip away at your confidence. You feel disrespected, but you don't say anything because you don't want to seem overly sensitive. A high-value man handles this differently. Instead of letting it slide, he calmly but firmly says, I don't find those comments funny and I won't tolerate being disrespected. By setting that boundary, he's not only protecting himself, but also challenging her to step up and treat him with the respect he deserves. Here's where Stoicism comes into play. One of the key teachings of Stoicism is to focus on what you can control and let go of what you can't. You can't control how someone reacts to your boundaries, but you can control whether or not you enforce them. By doing so, you're taking responsibility for your happiness and refusing to settle for less than you deserve. Let me share another story about a man named Daniel. Daniel was in a relationship where his girlfriend often made plans without considering his schedule. Instead of saying anything, he'd go along with it, even if it meant canceling his own commitments. Over time, he began to feel resentful, but he didn't want to rock the boat. It wasn't until he finally spoke up that things changed. He told her, I appreciate that you want to make plans, but I need to be part of the decision-making process. My time is valuable, and I want us to make plans that work for both of us. At first, she was caught off guard, but she quickly adjusted. Why? Because Daniel's boundary wasn't about controlling her, it was about creating mutual respect. Boundaries aren't just about protecting yourself. They're about setting the tone for how others treat you. When you enforce your boundaries, you inspire those around you to rise to your level. And if they can't or won't, that's your sign to move on and make space for someone who will. So, how do you start setting boundaries in your relationships? First, identify your non-negotiables. What behaviors or situations make you feel disrespected or drained? Write them down and get crystal clear on what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not. Next, practice communicating those boundaries calmly and confidently. Use I statements like, I feel disrespected when, or this is what I need in a relationship, instead of accusatory language. Finally, be prepared to follow through. Boundaries only work if you enforce them consistently. When you do, you're not just protecting your well-being, you're building a foundation of respect that strengthens the relationship. Let me leave you with this. Boundaries are not barriers. They're bridges. They create a space where both people can feel valued, respected, and understood. And when you master the art of setting and keeping boundaries, you don't just transform your relationships, you transform how you see yourself. So, are you ready to take control of your happiness and start setting boundaries that honor your worth? Stay with me, because the next principle we're diving into is one of the most intriguing yet. The power of mystery and how it keeps her captivated. Number 7, embrace mystery. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you left someone genuinely curious about you? Not in a way that was manipulative or withholding, but in a way that sparked their desire to learn more. For many men, the temptation to overshare can be overwhelming, especially when they feel a connection with someone. You want to bond, to relate, to prove that you're worth investing in. But here's the paradox. The more you reveal up front, the less room you leave for curiosity. And curiosity, my friends, is one of the most powerful drivers of emotional attraction. Mystery isn't about playing games or keeping secrets. It's about pacing. It's about letting her peel back the layers of who you are over time, rather than laying everything out on the table in one go. Think of it like reading a great book. If the ending is revealed in the first chapter, would you keep reading? Probably not. What keeps you engaged is the journey, the twists, turns, and gradual unfolding of the plot. The same principle applies to relationships. Take a moment to reflect. Have you ever felt the urge to explain yourself in great detail during a conversation? Maybe you shared too much about your past relationships or went on a tangent about your life story. While your intentions might have been good, this tendency to overshare can dilute the sense of intrigue that naturally builds over time. Let me tell you about a guy I know. We'll call him Mark. Mark was the kind of man who always felt the need to prove himself. On first dates, he'd share everything, his childhood struggles, his career ambitions, even his fears. He thought that by being an open book, he'd create a deep connection quickly. But instead, he often found that women would lose interest after a few dates. It wasn't until Mark learned the art of embracing mystery that things started to change. Instead of oversharing, he began to focus on being present in the moment. When asked about his past, he'd give thoughtful but concise answers, like, "I've learned a lot from my experiences, and I'm grateful for where they've brought me." This left room for her to ask follow-up questions if she was genuinely interested. Over time, he noticed a shift. Women leaned in, asked more about him, and seemed genuinely curious to know him better. So, how can you embrace mystery in your own life? It starts with understanding that being mysterious doesn't mean hiding who you are. It's about revealing yourself at the right pace. When you control how much you share and when, you create a dynamic where she feels excited to learn more about you. Let's consider an example. Imagine you're on a date, and she asks about your career. Instead of diving into a detailed explanation of your day-to-day responsibilities, you might say, "I work in a field that challenges me every day, and I love what I do." That's enough to give her a glimpse into your life while leaving room for curiosity. If she's interested, she'll ask more, and that's the beauty of it. The conversation flows naturally, and she becomes more engaged in discovering who you are. But mystery isn't just about what you say, it's also about how you live. A man with a rich, independent life naturally exudes an air of intrigue. When your time is filled with passions, hobbies, and pursuits that have nothing to do with her, she starts to wonder, what drives him? What inspires him? What's he working on? That sense of curiosity is incredibly powerful, and it keeps her invested in the relationship. Let me share another story. A friend of mine, Daniel, was always the nice guy. He'd make himself available at all times, respond immediately to texts, and share every detail about his life in the hope of creating a connection. But it often backfired. Women appreciated his openness, but didn't feel the spark that kept them intrigued. One day, Daniel decided to change his approach. He started prioritizing his own life, his gym routine, his passion for photography, and spending time with his friends. He didn't respond to texts immediately if he was busy, and when he did reply, his messages were thoughtful, but not overly detailed. Over time, women began to view him differently. They saw him as someone with depth, independence, and a life that didn't revolve around them. The key takeaway here is this. Embracing mystery isn't about being distant or detached. It's about creating a balance between openness and restraint. When you reveal just enough to spark curiosity but hold back enough to keep her intrigued, you create a dynamic that feels exciting and natural. But let's address the elephant in the room. Doesn't embracing mystery mean you're holding back who you really are? Absolutely not. It's not about pretending to be someone you're not. It's about showing her that you're a man of depth and substance. It's about inviting her to discover those layers over time, rather than overwhelming her with everything at once. Here's a practical way to apply this. The next time you're tempted to send a long, detailed text explaining your plans or feelings, pause. Ask yourself, am I leaving room for curiosity? Instead, send a concise message that invites engagement without over-explaining. For example, instead of saying, I'm busy all day with work, then going to the gym and meeting friends after that, you might say, it's a packed day, but I'll catch you later. This small shift can make a big difference in how your interactions feel. It creates a sense of anticipation and leaves her wanting to know more. At its core, embracing mystery is about pacing the connection. It's about recognizing that attraction isn't about giving away the ending. It's about letting her enjoy the story. When you live with this balance, you don't just attract her attention, you captivate it. You become the man she wants to know more about, the man she can't stop thinking about, and the man she feels privileged to uncover. So, let me leave you with this. Mystery isn't something you create, it's something you are. Every man has layers of complexity, strength, and depth waiting to be discovered. The key is to reveal those layers at the right pace. When you do, you don't just become memorable, you become unforgettable. If you're ready to take all these principles and bring them together, stay tuned. In the next section, we'll wrap up with the ultimate takeaways and how to apply these acts in your life, starting today. Conclusion: you've made it this far, and now you hold the keys to transforming not only how women see you, but how you see yourself. We've explored 7 timeless acts that, when mastered, can elevate you into the realm of high-value men. Men who don't chase but attract, men who don't settle but inspire respect, admiration, and genuine connection. Let's take a moment to reflect on what we've covered. You've learned the power of being comfortable walking away, not out of indifference, but because you know your worth and won't settle for less. You've discovered why valuing your attention is crucial, ensuring that it's seen as a privilege and not something to take for granted. Emotional independence showed you how to reclaim control over your happiness, reminding you that your worth is not defined by someone else's actions. You've understood the importance of giving her space to chase you, creating a dynamic of mutual effort rather than one-sided pursuit. Celebrating your own life emphasized the need to prioritize your passions and live with purpose, making you magnetic in ways that words can't describe. Setting boundaries taught you to communicate your limits with confidence, ensuring that respect becomes the foundation of your relationships. And finally, embracing mystery revealed how pacing your connection and letting her uncover you layer by layer keeps her captivated and invested. These principles aren't about playing games or following outdated dating scripts. They're about stepping into your power as a man who knows his worth, lives with intention, and commands respect effortlessly. But here's the beautiful truth. These acts don't just transform your relationships. They transform you. They help you become the best version of yourself, a man who is confident, grounded, and unapologetically authentic. So where do you go from here? Start small. Choose one act to focus on this week. Maybe it's setting a boundary you've been avoiding, prioritizing a hobby you've neglected, or simply pausing before overextending your attention. Commit to it fully and watch how your energy begins to shift, not just in your relationships, but in every area of your life. Remember, the journey to becoming a high-value man isn't about perfection. It's about progress. Each step you take builds on the last, creating a foundation of confidence, self-respect, and resilience that no one can shake. Let me leave you with this. True power isn't about controlling others. It's about mastering yourself. It's about taking responsibility for your emotions, your boundaries, and your happiness. When you embody that mindset, you don't just attract love, you attract respect, admiration, and opportunities that align with the life you're building. If this message resonates with you, I encourage you to take action today. Start living these principles, not just for her, but for yourself. And if you're ready to continue this journey of growth and transformation, join this community of high-value men. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below sharing which of these acts speaks to you the most. Your voice matters. Your growth inspires, and your story has the power to uplift others. Thank you for being here, for investing in yourself, and for stepping into your power. The best is yet to come, so stay confident, stay grounded, and remember, you are enough, exactly as you are. Until next time, high-value men, keep striving, keep growing, and keep shining.